During the Great Depression, studios found that the best medicine for unemployment was a good laugh. Comedies, the cheap remedy full of physical gags, zany characters, and sexual innuendos, dominated theater screens from the 1930s to the 1950s. Women's suffrage, high society, and the institution of marriage, it was all up for grabs with the wittiest scripts and the biggest stars. For this video, I'm looking at two subgenres of comedy that were most popular during the old Hollywood era: slapstick and screwball. Genres that are nowhere near as popular in today's market, but were essential in defining the movies we still watch today. To start off, what was the DNA of a comedy motion picture in old Hollywood? Studio comedies are more farcical than satire. Wacky antics with cartoonish characters, situational comedy over specific allusions to real-life people. A love interest having a pet leopard? Sure. A trio of bums winning a horse race to save a sanatorium? Why not? Two musicians dressing in drag to escape murderous gangsters? Sign me up. While today's comedies lean towards satire to directly point out real-world absurdity, these motion pictures served as cathartic fantasies to escape real life. Class differences were all the rage during the Great Depression. What's more entertaining for struggling audiences than watching a scrappy, everyday man bump into the daughter of a millionaire on a Greyhound night bus? Or Jerry Lewis dancing around the country club in a robe and pipe? Or a bunch of tramps beating aristocrats in a horse race? There was a catharsis watching unemployed characters win on the silver screen, and the setup of ordinary characters wandering around decorated mansions is ripe for comedy. Old Hollywood studios leaned into this conflict because Nickelodeon tickets were cheaper than competing venues of entertainment. So motion pictures quickly became the chosen pastime for the working class. Production practices were very different 80 to 90 years ago. Studio setups filmed long takes in either medium shots or full wides. Every actor in a scene would perform in the same shot at the same time, more like a stage play. So the style of comedy and line reads followed suit. Actors served snappy dialogue back and forth like tennis matches. And once you had two superstars next to each other, it became a competition to see who could steal the show first. So if your career is on the rise and dialogue grows stale, you better know how to dance. One of the big comedy styles in old Hollywood was the slapstick. The popular acts were the likes of the Three Stooges or Martin and Lewis, but the real kings of this genre were the Marx Brothers, a trio that, in A Day at the Races, jumped between rushed romances and random musical numbers. It was an MGM picture, to perfect one-off skits similar to Monty Python episodes. Storylines in slapstick pictures rarely had streamlined plots. Scenes would often have little connection to the ones preceding or following them. These motion pictures are clearly a product of their time. The dynamic between Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis in the Caddy is almost torturous. But the depth Hollywood comedians needed to stay in the spotlight is jaw-dropping. If you can't talk funny, you're singing. If you're not singing, you're dancing. And if you're not dancing, you're falling off a building. Screwball comedies could not be more different. The loose chaos of slapstick is replaced by a rigid progression of the central romance. The core of screwball comedies is the squabbling gender dynamic between the romantic leads. What made these pictures unique were the independent, fast-talking women in them that typically had more social power than the man. Women at this time were climbing the ranks of society through the women's suffrage movement and started having careers in offices around the World War II era. This shift in gender equality translated directly to the screen. A battle of the sexes where man butts heads with woman over the institution of marriage and traditional responsibilities versus modern attitudes. This is a post-Flapper Girl world. So the women aren't fighting to dance late and drink more. They are clashing with the men over who they choose to marry and why. Riches versus true love, class versus freedom, fidelity versus divorce. How scandalous. Under the Haze Code too? On the page, That meant choosing between an aristocrat or a journalist, or even worse, a saxophone player. This era is where we get the blueprint for modern rom-coms. The meet cute, the bickering enemies to lovers, the midpoint misunderstanding, the runaway bride, and the wedding that serves as the finale. The women are finally the focus of the relationship. They are not the love interest or object of desire like in the gangster pictures. They are three-dimensional characters, and they're always engaged or proposed to a complete fraud of a man at the beginning. So our male main character has to call her out like, "You're gonna marry that guy? Him? You're better than that, don't settle." The very first Screwball and rom-com, It Happened One Night, defines this blueprint flawlessly. Running gags like the walls of Jericho being a privacy bedsheet on a string, and the intro to hitchhiking scene is Hollywood magic to this day. Hell, the entire 90s and 2000s catalog has completely ripped off Clark Gable, Claudette Colbert, and Frank Capra's work, and we are all the better for it. True screwballs, such as Bringing Up Baby, still relied on the wacky situational comedy and zany characters over the romance. It's a ratio, comedy to romance, that heavily influences which one will be your favorite. Roman Holiday is an amazing film during this time, and Gregory Peck does call Audrey Hepburn a screwball, but it's too sincere and its ending far too brutal to fit this genre's conventions. For every It Happened One Night, there's a Some Like It Hot, and that's probably why this genre lasted as long as it did. The big draw of Hollywood comedies were the star-studded duos, from clashing romantics to buddies at each other's throats. These roles started and revived celebrities' entire careers. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis worked together for 17 pictures, which makes no sense in today's standards. Imagine Post Malone acting next to Jim Carrey for 7 years. Ew. The other side of the coin is Katharine Hepburn, whose transition from dramas into comedy with Bringing Up Baby was deemed box office poison, yet she completely revived her career 2 years later in A Philadelphia Story. Katharine Hepburn is arguably the face of the screwball genre, despite her being a more dramatic actress, because she was the feminist icon at the time. Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, and Spencer Tracy all wrestle unfitting suitors for her hand, yet she still stands apart despite this genre being built on dynamic duos.
Do you use a bow or do you just pluck it? Most of the time, I slap it.
A key part of the screwball that helped it succeed so well in the 30s to 50s was its emphasis on innuendo. These films existed under the Haze Code. If you don't know what that is, I made a separate video you could check out. So even though films were questioning the point of marriage and class structures, they had to be clever when approaching the quiet parts out loud. Most of the dialogue between the bickering leads would have sexual undertones. In Bringing Up Baby, zoologists question why a tailbone didn't fit in the rear the night before. In A Philadelphia Story, Katharine Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart get so drunk while swimming that people think they had sex the night before her wedding, and are too posh to just come out and ask Jimmy Stewart what actually transpired, or even say what they think transpired in front of Katharine Hepburn. Spencer Tracy in Desk Set wears Cutler's Christmas bathrobe, leading to a confrontation where Cutler insinuates Katharine Hepburn's bunny is sleeping around while he's out of town. But the best one is the running gag that started it all in It Happened One Night, where the last shot is the walls of Jericho finally toppling, now that they are on honeymoon. Most of these references to sex end up being misunderstandings because of the Haze Code and marriage and sanctity of the bedroom, all those rules. So much so that film critic Andrew Sarris labeled the genre as sex comedy without the sex. But that didn't matter. The hints of taboo were just as sensational as the final kiss. Once the 60s started, these sly references and subtext quickly became obsolete. Why allude to sex when hippies are singing about free love out in the streets? But don't worry, the screwball decided to end its 25-year reign with a banger. Billy Wilder, sneaking through the more forgiving Haze Code in 1959, released Some Like It Hot under United Artists. This film is legit a culture shock to this day. Not only do we follow two musicians in drag the entire time, but we see Marilyn Monroe in the later part of her career in dresses actresses today wouldn't wear on camera. The snappy dialogue has never been faster, the physical gags are sexier and wackier than ever before, and gender roles are so inverted that the men are the ones being objectified and sexually harassed in elevators. It Happened One Night might deserve the crown for being sexy in 1934, but this motion picture wins Best Dressed for being risque in 2025. In recent decades, slapstick comes and goes with the likes of Adam Sandler and Jim Carrey. But the screwball is rarer than diamonds. Only genre geeks like the Coen brothers enjoy playing in that sandbox. Watch Raising Arizona, it's one of their best. There's an argument that innuendos are better than just talking about sex. It takes more creativity and relies more on filmmaking techniques to hide the imagery. And yet the other key feature of Screwball is almost too ordinary to turn into entertainment these days. Strong, independent, career-oriented women. That's every Sandra Bullock movie. Greta Gerwig is killing it with feminist cinema right now, where she critiques marriage in a similar light as economics preventing romance. Screwball comedies existed in a very specific social ecosystem. They were risky at the time, and that's why they are so fun to watch. That era is long gone, but their legacy echoes in the filmmakers like Gerwig calling out archaic social structures still hanging around. Hopefully you learned a little bit about slapstick and screwball comedies. I'd love to stay and chat, but I got a wedding to crash. The Duchess said she loved me last night, and her fiance's a horse.